ask is, as we're starting to add support for asynchronous messaging in Reciprocate, so announcing when there's a registration or when someone sends a notify, for example, could Kamailio, has Kamailio gone very far down that path, or are you planning to go down that path? And could we use a common format for things like JSON messages that we send out over the topics so that people can use the same code to receive the messages from either Kamailio or Repro or anything else?
I mean, we had a lot of JSON stuff lately, and practically from Kamailio point of view, it's a matter of configuration file. So I know that, for example, Julian here did like ACC JSON, right? So when the call happens, you can get the CDR in config file, and then you can push it. We have JSON RPC with netstring, then we have Rabbit MQ, we have NSQ, which was developed by Emmanuel, which should be also here. But we don't have like a standard format ourselves. We can think about something together. I don't know if there is any standardization out there for such kind of format. So we have a lot of kind of JSON support, but with Kamailio it will be a matter of config file to really build the structure of the document and push it out with even HTTP. We can push it out with a client. Federico, it's probably here. He can do it asynchronous with the HTTP async client module. Federico that presented home, it's here. It's hidden. He doesn't want to answer questions. But yeah, there is no standard format or that we have. Could be something that to discuss.
It could be useful to have a page like with an index of all these message formats that people have implemented, just so we can dig into them more quickly. Especially if we can find a way to tag the modules or something that do this, so the list can be built automatically. So
yeah, at least with a accounting module, I know that you can set these attribute names via, most of them via parameters. So then, again, for us, in Kamailio, it's hard to find a lot of hard-coded names. Typically, it's a lot of flexibility, which some people hate, because they have to configure a lot, including the counting attributes name for a call. So yeah, but it's good to try to make it a bit more uniform. Actually, with Asterisk guys, we had a discussion last Asterisk DevCon or 2 editions ago, so we are a bit behind. It was about logging in a standard format. They did some work in pushing logs in JSON format, and I found that interesting, but I didn't find the time to implement it in Kamailio. So maybe till the next AstriCon, I can look at the Asterisk and see how they do the logging in JSON format, and would be easier for people to digest from both applications. So that's good to have kind of uniform between open source application, logging, events, and so on in this format. Asterisk did a lot of work in this respect with their ARI, so that could be a source of inspiration for some message format there and responses. But so I think it's maybe a good start. Next question that someone wants to ask. Everything is great with Kamailio. We have.
Yeah. My question is about actually size of the packet. So if maybe, I don't know, Kamailio is providing some, in the future, maybe a way of compressing these SIP messages, the signaling messages between internal infrastructure, because with the WebRTC within all of this stuff, and if you have many layers of servers, your routing header become more and more and more. So is there any way of compressing the SIP messages, at least between Kamailios?
Okay, so I'm probably I will. So I complete after Henning, but.
Are you aware of this GC compress module? Okay. And this maybe could be extended, as you're right. This is only for SDP. In the end, it's just a wrapper around the gzip library. Could be extended maybe with some triggers with some event routes. I don't know, Daniel.
Yeah, no, actually we have, but I'm not sure. I don't see Emmanuel here. If he was the author of it, the guy that wrote the NSQ, he said it's gonna be here. But I'm not sure if he's the author. But we have a event route for sort of no zip message.
Yep.
So whenever we get a message, we try to parse it. If we fail, we call an event route. And look, it's either key EX from Kamailio extension or corex from core extension. That's the module. I actually replied on the mailing list maybe a few weeks ago. I don't know if you asked that question because it sounds quite similar. But if you look at the README of that module, it shows an example by using Pulse script to compress and decompress. So you decompress it when you receive it, then you pass it to Kamailio route block. And then when sending out, you can compress it again, and shows an example of a Pulse script that executes zip compression, decompression, so the gzip, the standard one. So there is support for this kind of compression with this like non-zip callbacks to the config file, these event routes. Then if you want to cut the size, we have this topos module, which is cutting only headers. If you have the body, then maybe you can combine it with gz compress. But you need next hop to understand it. So there is a standard zip compression, but it's a bit heavy in terms of implementation. I know that we looked back in 2002-03 while I was working at the institute, but it was kind of very complex to implement in the way that you have to implement or provide the bytecode of your compressor, decompressor, so the other side can download it from you and do compression, decompression with your own algorithm. So that's kind of crazy stuff. But this with gzip, it's pretty much there. And again, it's an example in the corex or kex module. Look on it and see if it's exactly what you need. OK, so maybe another question around here. Otherwise, we can close the project. No. Looks like it's finished.
It's done.
It's done. We go for the here. We have here one question. It gets warm by the end of the times.
There's a mailing list topic about Kamailio and options round trip time.
Yeah.
We have some interest on that feature. Are you planning to incorporate that and user log in somewhere in time?
Probably will make it to the next release. Should not be that big effort to do it. It's just wrong timing so far. I mean, lack of time rather than wrong timing. It's better said. So it's about this round trip that we send. It's mainly for NAT purposes. This keep alive, we send them in stateless mode. And then we don't care if we get a reply or not. But many people are interested to see how fast the other device is responding. Julian did the work for dispatcher module, right? You track this when you get back the option reply to have this statistics on latency and so on. So at the end, the code is there. We just need to rely on TM module to send. Is the module that manages the transaction. So we create the option transaction, and when we get the reply, we keep the difference between them. So probably we'll keep an option of stateless like it is now. And for those that want to measure, we'll be in stateful mode. But I think we'll make it to, it's one of my top priorities. Probably I'll have it tomorrow, but we got into an issue with this new libSSL library, and I spent a lot of time there, and lately I didn't have much, but what I spent, I was digging into this libSSL library, and a couple of top priorities were not addressed, but this is something that, again, is not complex and will make it to the next 5.3 major release. Okay, so what else you want in Kamailio to be implemented? Valentin?
Yes, we are interested in the IMS modules of the Kamailio mostly. And we had some troubles with some database modes which were not implemented and something in this kind. Would you recommend to make this all, to solve everything on ourselves? Or is somebody here today for the IMS modules to get in contact with?
Yeah, probably I can also address this one. We had a discussion, and it's also Stefano, it's a couple of rows in the back. So first the history, so put everyone in the context. The IMS modules were for a long time a separate project, OpenIMS Core. So they were built on top of SIP Express router. The initial name of the project by the time we were working for the Fraunhofer Focus Institute. Then we created OpenSCR as a fork because the institute sold to Tekelec the license on SIP Express router, and Tekelec didn't focus much on open source. But the institute continued on the SIP Express router branch and built these modules, IMS extensions, on SIP Express router. And in 2008, as we merged also back with the SIP Express router branch, and also we incorporated the OpenIMS project in Kamailio. So we kind of evolved in parallel, and when it was Karsten and the guys from Smile Telecom that they did most of the work, they kind of used some of Kamailio modules and put only some code from the OpenIMS project, OpenIMS Core project, and some of the DB modes were not really fully ported, not ported, because as they were built on SIP Express router, they didn't have so many DB modes as with Kamailio, but they kind of made it half-half. They still put it on top of Kamailio modules, but only the IMS extension, and those of DB modes were not tested or not implemented properly. So anyhow, coming back, the idea with this IMS is we discussed it also at the last IRC Devel meeting and internally with some other developers. This would be a project that from the community was kind of couple of companies being interested on an area of extensions and somehow supporting in terms of could be financial to pay a developer from the community, or could be testing infrastructure, some resource, because coding sometimes is the easiest part. And IMS, you know, it's a lot of nodes, so testing it is not easy. So the idea is to have this kind of collaboration between a couple of companies and the community and build a team. And one of the projects would be this IMS, and as I said, Stefano in the back there, it's also, I had discussions with him about this topic, and it's interested. With Fred and other guys, we discussed about presence that might benefit on this NoSQL distribution like of states as an alternative for what we have now with the database. And we already had a couple of companies interested either in supporting financially or with infrastructure or so. I'm sure also James here is interested on IMS voice over LT, so it's interest. Of course, if you can do it in-house, your company, you have the team, you are welcome to just contribute it. But from the project itself, it's an interest to bring this to a proper integration, because as I said, they were kind of left half-half integrated with some module parameters not really functional there. So they put the module parameters because we had it in Kamailio for that kind of user location or register, but they haven't implemented because they were not implemented in the SIP Express router back in the days. So there should be some consistent work on this one to review it and to do, at least remove if they don't work or fix if possible. Okay, yeah, you are on my list to discuss about this topic during this event, as I know you did a lot of work, and thanks for your contribution to the IMS extensions. And I will have it also tomorrow in this last year in review, something that we decided part of the project. Henning, you want to add something?
Oh, I mean, so in general, if you encounter issues with these modules or with other modules, it's always good to report them, of course. Yeah, like open a tracker item that let other people know, let us know about that. But for these modules, Daniel mentioned it, I think they need a bit more like a coordinated effort because it's a complicated issue, complicated topic. And even to set up a test bed for that, it's not trivial. You really need to dig into the modules. And yeah, this is one of the areas, as Daniel mentioned, where we would really like to extend there, yeah.
Okay, so we have other developers. You can even still ask questions about this interesting RTP media server module. So now it's about everything Kamailio, what you want to have, what's not working fine, and we have also Andreas, the RTP engine teams around, so it's not only Kamailio, it's the ecosystem, you know. Get your chance to address your question. Of course, if you just ask, give me the config for next Skype replacement platform, probably it's not. So what's missing from your point of view? What you like to be in till next year, like next Kamailio world?
Much more WebRTC support.
In the way of what's missing from WebRTC support? Can you say what we are lacking so you can get the microphone?
Like implemented like in FreeSwitch.
But FreeSwitch is mainly media processing, you say?
Yes.
That's rather new. So far, before Julian contributed that module, were no media processing at all. And even then, like Julian said before, it's at the beginning, and probably WebRTC, it's a big stuff. And we don't really, I mean, Julian is more like reusing ORTP library, you were right?
With these libraries, they support WebRTC if you combine them all together. With BellSip, you have like the proper ICE and everything that is needed. I think they support WebRTC, but that's another roadmap, I think. Maybe
but then we have,
Janus
you know, RTP engine. You know RTP engine that can do encryption, decryption? You know about RTP engine?
No, only for signaling.
At signaling, we do it. I mean,
Only for signaling, not for RTP.
but what we are missing there, because nobody reported that. I mean,
Support everything for signaling.
I mean, we had a couple of issues, and Armen was helping his team. I don't know if Armen is still here, or we'll have a presentation tomorrow, a short one tomorrow evening. There was some issue with the web socket module, some synchronization issue there, some race. But otherwise, nobody reported like we lack, from signaling point of view, like SIP over WebSockets. Of course, you can do data channels, but I don't think it's the interest of Kamailio to go that direction because everyone is doing SIP over WebSockets. But yeah, I think WebRTC, we haven't seen any like, hey, you missed that feature. It was, hey, you got this kind of maybe a crash or maybe not sending keep alives or mixing the connections, but other issue we haven't seen lately. We have Julian.
So do you think OpenSSL is still a good, reliable option, or is it becoming overcomplicated? It's fast, like compared to Polar SSL.
Yeah, it's fast, and now they have. I mean, it's a foundation. It looks like developing on the right direction from like cleaning the code or so, but they removed the API to interface with other application, and we are hit by they removed the API to set the locking function, lock unlock, the mutex, and they made it for threads. and we are multi-process, and we have an issue with that one that you can get Kamailio processes blocked. So we have to find a solution. It was Richard from Zipwise that already provided a workaround to test with, like.
Thanks, because I also there was this update to one they requested.
So we are practically preload the library to replace the POSIX mutex with our own variant where, so there are a couple of stages or a couple of solutions I'm looking at. I didn't want to start it before Kamailio because I want to address it with the OpenSSL project, and then probably I will have to be consistent there. So in a couple of days after Kamailio, I plan to at least, first option will be to ask them to allow us to set the process shared option for POSIX threads, which is fine on Linux. And on the latest BSDs, I checked on the manual and the previous BSD version, like, I don't know, 3 edition before. So if someone is running an old BSD, might get hit when they say if you set the process shared option for mutexes, it doesn't do anything. But the latest manual, BSD manual, says it's okay, they don't have this limitation anymore. Then what they are very good is these engines for hardware. So if you really need large deployment and a lot of encryption, decryption, I think OpenSSL is one of the only options for putting some hardware accelerators with new TLS. I know there are some licenses issues typically. So it's what we have, and yeah, we discovered this issue like a couple of weeks ago with blocking, and the solution would be compile with libSSL 1.0, not 1.1, or try this preloaded shared library. But I think we should try it before ditching it, because at least the foundation that they made looks like being more serious about security, and they clean a lot of code. It's just by this cleaning, they remove something that we are using and we are relying on it. Sandra?
Were there any updates with regards to the fuzzing project that is going on?
Okay.
Yeah, so I can add something here. So the project continued the last year, basically. I found some issues in the topology hiding module, which were already fixed. Daniel and myself discussed also to extending it to this Google fuzzing infrastructure, but unfortunately it's a bit difficult because of these dependencies, and you need to properly integrate it into this Google infrastructure. So it's not that easy, unfortunately. So far the project's still running, and even now it's...
In terms of coverage, are you looking at different modules?
Yeah, so
which modules are in there?
I extended it to the topology hiding module. I think it's now fine. Dialog module I also included. I mean, the issue is that if you want to include modules with database, of course, you know, it gets more complicated. So first I want to concentrate on these modules that don't need the database, which operates directly on the message, which probably also have the biggest risk, the biggest exposure to like malicious messages. So
yeah, so probably what we need to cover first, if we go even with Google or whatever, Henning is doing the fuzzing stuff with Kamailio lately. So it would be the parser and the network layer, transport layer, this TCP, TLS, UDP, because this is where you interact, as Henning said, with the bad guys out there.
I mean, for the main parser, I think it was like billions of tests what I have done on the infrastructure, and this is pretty stable. I mean, the issues that I found was like when a module then rely on a certain characteristic of a parser, which might not be true in certain message forms. Yeah, this is the main issue. For example, that I found for the topology hiding module. Just forgot to check for a certain condition. The parser was doing more or less the correct thing. We also did we made the parser a bit more safe. Daniel also contributed here something, but in the end, the parser was not crashing. The core was pretty fine, but the module that was working with the data was then doing something wrong.
Yeah, the topology hiding was designed the way that the config file should stay unchanged. So we kind of executed some callbacks before executing config file, and then some checks were not applied in a way or another, like we have with sanity checks, because the parsing happens before that. So yeah, Henning helped with discovering, and then we fixed some issues there. But
maybe to add here, so it's not that it's the topology hiding is unsecure. Yeah? It's really, I mean, if you find after maybe 4 months of fuzzing, if you find like 2-3 bugs, this is pretty okay. I mean, yeah, if you do fuzzing with some other open source libraries, you will get something after 1 hour. Yeah? I mean, it's really Kamailio has a pretty good quality here, I would say. If after 3-4 months, I mean, even an attacker that would like to do it needs to invest this time. Yeah.
Sure, sure. But once it's found, then it can be.
Of course, it's already fixed. Yeah.
Else, I remember you were using AFL.
Yes.
Are you still with AFL or?
Yes.
Okay.
Works
Have you
fine.
looked at the fuzzer?
Yeah, I looked briefly to it, but so far the AFL worked fine. I still found something, but if now it's not finding anything new, I will probably look to libfuzzer. Yeah, that also sounds promising. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
okay, so we have this one, but we have other developers. So if you have questions, also as a developer or as here, Henning, one here by David or so.
Hello. Talking about topology hiding, do you intend to have topology hiding only on one direction?
Yeah, that's another question that was asked. Right now, yeah, you can't do easily these spirals, so it's more like breaking in two in the middle, but different direction. If you want to look back to the same topology hiding using topos module, it's not working. With topology hiding using topo module, so we have 2 of them, topo H from topology hiding, and the second one I added was topology stripping, topos S. That's not having the spiral support. The first one doesn't have any issue with that, or should not have any issue. So yeah, I'm planning to add it, but again, it's kind of got aside. I think I also said last year about that, but it's something that was requested, and I'm planning to address it sometime soon. It's not something that is not useful. It's just sometimes is not enough days in the week or so. But if anyone wants to contribute, I can also say the idea is to tag it the direction, so you know you first search by tag, and that's easy to decide by the source IP, destination IP. So it should not be something complex to do. It's just, again, coding sometimes it's easier, but then you have to plan also for testing and running some use cases. Miko?
Yes. Sometimes there has been discussion about replicating the internal state of TM. So my question is it possible, maybe somehow with DMQ nowadays? And second question, does it make any sense?
So yeah, this was actually discussed from like early phase of SIP Express routers, so 15, 17, even 18 years, if I count properly now. The problem will not be replicating the data. The problem is there are timers running, retransmission timers, and callbacks executed. So if you replicate to another state, if you lose like 2 seconds, you kind of miss this retransmission timer, which is half a second, 1 second, and so on. And if you replicate it and like for high availability, like if you replicate and this goes down and the other one have to pick up the same transaction, and the execution callback could be in the middle of, like, I don't know, for dialog callbacks or other callbacks we have there that are executed at various moments of a transaction management. You might end in kind of inconsistent data also with this retransmission, reply matching, and so on. So if it's doable, probably everything is doable, right, with coding. But making sense, it's probably, from my point of view, not much. I mean, it will be a lot of time spent there. You can't have complete and smooth operation when you replicate a transaction and you have to switch over to a backup system. like a standby, because again, retransmission and whatever, you still have a gap of few seconds to happen in between. So the timers are the main concern here, because it's all was this retransmit, get the reply, a transaction. It's quite large structure, because you can have one call coming in, like a request, and I have 10 devices, you call me, there are 10 invites going out. And each of them, one gets trying, one doesn't get anything, one gets, I'm out of lunch because it's from the office. So all of them have states, all these outgoing branches. So you have to make a trade-off between benefits and complexity, and again, sometimes it's 1 second late, it's too late. So if someone wants to address it, we can look at it, but from my point of view, I'm not planning to put any resource on that, because I don't see any benefits. Again, we discussed it even in the initial SIP Express router team. It's why TM doesn't have any database support, while Dialog has, and most of the other modules that need to recover some states have it. But with TM, again, timers are critical, and many branches, each with own timer. Now we have from Federico this with new registration, which can create a new branch later in the middle, because before with parallel forking, you create all the branches at the same time. Now you get this push notification, a registration comes in, and you create a new branch in the middle of retransmitting other branches. So if you, depending on your configuration, could become even more complex. So unless you charge €1 million per call, you can just drop a call at that time. And probably the people are more happy to dial again in 1 minute and everything, or 10 seconds and everything is fine, than paying €1 million call to have a smooth handover when happens once in a while. Fred, you wanted, and maybe we are.
Well, I was just wondering if, because at that point it's a PJ recovery, so what would be?
Yeah, dialogue, it's not a problem. It's just this transaction. So, I mean, in most of the cases of a retransmission, UDP is no problem. The problem would be with TCP, where you say, I receive it, but doesn't complete, and you have to switch over. And as you switch over, also the device needs to reconnect if it's TCP TLS, and then create a new connection. It's a new contact, and they will do like a re-invite, or should do it. So it's overall, even if you switch over with active transaction, nothing really bad happens. Maybe one call in 1,000, it's in that critical phase that you got it. You say, I receive it, but you didn't send out. Because if you send it out, then you start receiving replies, and replies we can route it without transactions. So we can discuss more if you want, but later in the breaks, because I think, Sandro, you are the next one. So can you please just set up there? And maybe last question.
I mean, the dialog failover should also work. I mean, I did some work here. There were some issues with the dialog callbacks, which were fixed as well. So you will not lose any dialog information. If you use a database, it's all fine. As Dennis said, you lose the transactions. Some more?
Yeah, on dialogue also, with the push from the EvoSIP team, there was also, and I'll have this with replication actually, it will be my last talk if you survive these 3 days till the last session. It's about replication mechanism in Kamailio, and I'm also addressing a bit of this dialogue, but I made kind of hybrid solution. You can load from database if you don't find the dialog structure in memory, so it's a bit more flexibility. Who added? Charles, I think, added the support for dialog replication with DMQ. But I'll chat a bit more about that on Wednesday, last session. That will be, again, me. Okay, so thanks for participating. I'll have a bit more tomorrow on the plans for the future.